Welcome back to Progressive E. This is our how-to on the new X9000 app on the Ultra B. Okay, pretty simple. Step one, turn your bike, wait till you hear the little chirp from your controller, open up your app, click search. You'll see I've done this before, and the cool thing about the new app as well is that you can actually label physically what bike it is. So if you have multiple bikes, if you have 9,000 bikes like we do, pretty much you can just click into it, select which bike you want to play with, and it's nice and easy. Or, you know, if you're riding with a mate and you want to change their settings, you'll see it's not your bike, click on it, low power, you just bet him on a race. So straight up, open up the app. The first thing you want to do is basically check that your firmware is up to date. So if you click on settings, you scroll across to here, you'll see you've got your firmware updater. Basically click on this one here. Basically it will check if the controller has the newest firmware. If you don't, it's going to be available and you're going to see there's a new version. Basically click update. What it will do is download the file directly onto the app and then it will update the controller. So basically what will happen is the app will download the firmware straight onto the app itself, and then it will just start updating the bike. It basically gives you a run through what it's doing, whether the firmware is completing. It is quite slow because it's over Bluetooth. Another thing to note as well is make sure you don't walk away. Don't let your phone basically close down. Don't lock your screen. Make sure you're keeping the phone awake, and yeah, just let it do its update. So right now we're at 50%, we'll sort of roll through. So once the firmware is loaded in the controller, basically it will give you a restarting thing. It says basically give it 15 seconds. It will do a countdown. You'll then hear the controller beep twice. Then you're basically ready to chuck in your settings. Okay, so you've just done the update on your bike. Because this isn't a Suron and because it isn't a stock throttle on an Ultra B either, the first thing I'm going to get is an error 23. But right now the controller just thinks it's a base firmware and it doesn't know what it is. So the first thing we're going to basically do is go into our general setup and we're going to tell the controller exactly what bike it is. So we've got a list here. We've got a Suron Light B, we've got an Ultra B, we have a Talaria Sting, and we have an Other. We'd use Other for a custom bike. In this case, we obviously know it's a Ultra B if my eyes are working correctly. Click on that one, and then tells us motor type, basically what you want to do. Now we have a huge list of motors in here, so EBMX has been building this pretty aggressively, so wait to see where this is in another month. But yep, anyway, pretty much click on Suron Ultra B. The next thing we want to do is go down to our battery settings. So if you've noticed here, 22S battery, so we want to make sure that we select a 22S. We also want to select what harness we have. So you can see we've got a 22S and a 20S. We've got a high power harness. So we basically want to select the Suron 82 volt Ultra B. That's going to give us a limit of 400 battery amps with the current wiring that's in here, and also a limit for the stock Suron motor as well. Your next step is to basically figure out your gear ratio. So I've got a 664 millimeter tire diameter. Gear ratio is 919. I actually don't know what it is for the Ultra B, but I'm going with 919 and it feels all right for now, and the speedo is not far off with the settings I've got here. We're in Australia, so temperature units, I want Celsius. Motor direction, it's not going to matter. Once we run an encoder calibration, we can figure that out. So next step is click save. It'll say save complete. So after you've been through the general tab, the next step is basically going to be the controller calibration. As we talked about before, I've got this error 23. This is just due to the throttle not being calibrated. This is a Domino twin hall throttle, and it's got different voltages to the stock Suron throttle that comes with the Ultra B. If you had the stock throttle, pretty much this would just work straight away. Because I don't, we're going to calibrate that now. So to do that, you want to go into controller calibration. You'll see twist throttle setup. What you want to basically do is click setup. It'll run through a wizard. The first step is basically click start wizard. It'll say setup process, and it says pretty much it's just a hold nothing, and it says release throttle. So basically don't touch the throttle. You'll see a voltage, so it's saying 0.24 volts, that's correct. It says press throttle, pull the throttle back, and I can see 4.76 volts or 4.75, and that is correct. It says release, and then gives you a high and low value. And knowing what this throttle is, I know that 0.24 volts is definitely no throttle, and 4.76 is definitely full throttle. Click save, and then click save again. And you'll notice that error 23 is now disappeared. So the thumb throttle, if we had an error 24, that would be related to this regen throttle. If this isn't fitted, you need to fit this first, calibrate it, and then remove it as part of the process. So scrolling down further in the setup, pretty much the next thing to do is look at field weakening. So I'm happy with 75% field weakening on this motor. The X9000 does have the ability to run more field weakening than a lot of the controllers. So 75% is good with this tune. It's definitely more than enough for what we need. The next step on top of that would be encoder calibration. So we've basically done our throttle. We know our thumb throttle is okay because we don't have any errors up here. But if we try put it into a mode, we can just hear a motor noise and nothing happens. And that's basically because the controller doesn't know the motor position, so no current's going to be applied. Pretty easy, literally click encoder, the wheel's going to spin. Okay, so now your wheel's done the dance of my people. Pretty much it says successfully calibrated, push OK. Pretty simple step there. And then click save. And then we should have a wheel that moves in a forward direction, which it definitely does. So now you've set up and you've got the bike working, you've got a couple of modes. So the next thing is basically setting up your power mode. So how much power do you want to run through this? So whether you're talking about range, you might want to run less power. Same with the field weakening as well. If you want a bike that basically travels for a longer distance, having that field weakening lower will obviously draw less current, less power, and essentially you'll go further, but not faster. Modes and levels, click on this one. Race is generally used. It's pretty self-explanatory that you want your higher power modes there. You might want to give it to a friend, and that's maybe where they'd use street mode. The other one to remember too is we can obviously change speed limits as well. So a lot of the enduro guys, they will use the street mode with a really low speed level, but really high power settings. And they'll use that for jumping over rocks, etc. And that's kind of why we still want to keep the two modes. It's also very easy to switch into those two modes. So now with the latest firmware, the quickest way to change to street mode, hold the button down, you'll see the little walk-on man, let go, now we're in street. So if you want that lower speed limit, or if you want to quickly go back up to race, hold the button down, let go, and now we're back in race mode. And that's the quickest way to change your speed limits on the fly. So now we're talking about power levels. I'm a bit of a power junkie. I like a powerful feeling bike. I like, as much as I can be scared is generally the better for me. So in race mode, I'm gonna set 30 kilowatt. I'm gonna set 25 for my mid-level. It's also worth knowing where it says low, mid, and high, that is 1, 2, and 3. So don't get confused that there's different variables. Just low means 1, mid means 2, high means 3. So I'm gonna set up my low for 20, my mid for 25, and my high for 30. And then as far as my phase current goes, this is the amount of torque that's applied to the motor. Generally, this is higher at lower RPMs. So I'm gonna go 900 on my phase, I'm gonna go 800 on my mid, and for my mode 1, I'm gonna go 700 for my low settings. So once again, low, mid, and high, 1, 2, and 3. It's pretty straightforward. The reverse strength as well. So don't think that's kind of like a regen thing. Basically what it is when we put the controller into reverse, it's how strong that reverse is actually applied. So for me, as far as reverse is concerned, I normally wind that all the way to 90%. Click save. Next thing you want to come over and see what your regen strength is as well. So from factory default with the settings I've put in, a lot of these settings will pre-fill. So the thumb regen at 100%. So basically if I use this thumb throttle, this will give me every bit of motor braking that's available. That's what I want. I want to use this as a rear brake sometimes, and I do want all the power. So from default, now I've put in the 22S settings, it automatically pre-fills this, that it is 100% because that is available. Speed limit as well, I want to set to 200 kilometers. That's the max that I'm kind of aiming for, and it's the max the controller gives us. You can see there's no change there because there's nothing to change. Now over in the street modes, what we talked about, different power levels and different power settings. So the main thing you want to look here is basically the speed limit. So I found something around the 20 kilometer mark is good for that enduro rock hopping scenario. So you can probably go a little bit lower as well, but you need to make sure the power settings are high. So like mode 1, for instance, we'll do the same theory again. We'll go 20, we'll go 25, and we'll go 30. And with our phase amps as well, we'll go 900 for the high, we'll go 800 for the mid, and we'll go 700 for the low. Once again, reverse gear strength, crack that up to 90, click save. Thumb regen, automatically pre-filled to 100, and that's your street and your race mode set up. So if you want a fairly high power bike, pretty much copy what I've got, especially if you've got a 22S Ultra B. And coming out of that one, the last one to do is basically just your throttle. So it's how your throttle feels. Do you want it snappier? Do you need more deadband? And all these settings are pretty much available here, as well as the off regen throttle. So off regen throttle, you basically apply throttle. When you let off, you get a tiny bit of motor drag. That's what off regen throttle is. I generally run that, and I normally leave that on 10%. Is my preferred method. I like a tiny bit of drag, but not a whole lot. You'll see you've got ramping time. So ramping time in this app is basically the ramp. So it's the throttle curve that the controller is trying to achieve with the amount of time that you twist this throttle. So if you need a more reactive throttle, you want to up or less reactive throttle. You want to up or lower that depending what you're after. So you want a really aggressive, snappy throttle, definitely play with that time. The negative ramping is the same as well. So basically it's how that negative off feeling feels. So if you need a more aggressive off feeling or a less aggressive off feeling, feel free to play around with it. It's pretty adaptable. You get this really dialed throttle feeling that feels really intuitive, and it just does exactly what you think it does. So definitely have a play with the ramping and the negative ramping. It's a very, very cool thing. With the Domino throttles, because they're slightly higher voltage, you obviously have a different voltage range. I normally find a deadband of 4 is pretty good. I wouldn't do a deadband of 4 on a stock throttle, but if you do have that higher voltage range, it's good to kind of just have that little bit more play before the throttle actually engages. Other thing to look at as well is the throttle expo mode, and it's basically the shape that the controller is going for. Polynormal is pretty much what everyone uses and reckons feels the best. I think it feels the best as well. You can try line and a few other ones, but that's generally the default setting is correct on that. I wouldn't change it. Expo as well is how quick that curve, you can actually modify that curve slightly. So positive expo will give you kind of more of a ramp curve on top of that polynormal shape, or you can make it a bit of a decline as well. So it's another way to kind of give you more adjustment in the throttle feel accordingly. I generally run like 0.2 positive on the high power bikes, but anything that's probably lower power, if you want it to feel more powerful, playing with the ramping time and also playing with the throttle expo is a good idea. Something that's really cool is basically the new dashboard that EBMX has got here. Click on this one, basically chuck it sideways, and now you've got something you can mount either on your handlebars or you can just screen record it in your pocket. That's what I've been doing a lot with. So basically you've obviously got your battery voltages, you can see your kilowatts, your motor RPM, you can see your throttle voltages, you can see how many phase amps you're running and your battery current. It's really, really cool to have this data, and I think the more people use this to definitely take advantage of it, you can basically see what your motor's pulling, whether you need either a bigger sprocket or a smaller sprocket, depending what you're trying to achieve. You actually see whether your motor is pulling the correct amps or it is pulling the correct 25 or 30 kilowatt rated, because you're gonna see it in here, and you better solve that issue, why that isn't happening as well. To get out of that, pretty simple, click on the little square icon here, goes back to where we were. And that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching our review and how-to on the new EBMX app for the X9000 controller. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I hope it helped you out. See you in the next one.